Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Perspective with me, Julie Ali. My guest today is a psychotherapist, and we are going to be talking post-elections. We're going to be talking about have expectations, or rather, will expectations be met? If not, what is the psyche and the feeling going to be like on the nation? And going forward, how do we pick ourselves up after the elections, when the euphoria has died down? Is it going to be back to normal? Or are we going to be very bruised? I don't know. We're going to unpack that with Frida Willis. She is a psychotherapist, as I've said. And then we'll also look at issues around anxiety, depression, etc., post-elections. But more importantly, we're going to be talking about influences and the instant age. What young people are up to in this day and age, how big are influences on our lives, how do they shape the lives of the young people in the country? Do they truly have a huge influence? And let's talk about instant everything with Frida Willis, a psychotherapist. Morning, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Julie. Thank you for having me.
Lovely to have you here, because we're going to be touching on some very pertinent issues this morning, very especially the instant age, social influences, bloggers, etc., how they have changed the landscape in the way we think, speak, just the way we live. They have a huge influence on our lives. And do we allow them to carry on? Do we have any say in the matter? Can we stop it? How do we stop it? So we're going to look around all of those issues. But first up, of course, the elections have been done and dusted. As you and I sit and speak here this morning, they're probably busy counting away. So we're not quite sure what the results look like right now. But I think there are lots of expectations. And I guess once the dust settles, how do we move forward? Is it going to be euphoria? Is it going to be disappointment? Is it going to be hope? Do we kind of hold on to hope? As a psychotherapist, these are all the things you come across in your work with your patients, is it not? And what is it that you tell them? How do you keep them grounded, so to speak?
That's a very good question, and I think it's a very important one, Julie, because information does not equal transformation. And that's quite a powerful point to begin with. We as a collective, as a country, we all have hope. And that's a beautiful thing, and I believe that should never be underestimated. So that's first point. Second point is, it really is important for us to look at the outcome on the macro, on the total, on the whole of the country. But it's also based on how each individual thinks and feels and acts. Because when we have a group of individuals whose thinking is sound, logical, rational, practical, optimistic, realistic, accountable, then the collective will eventually evolve into that. But if we have a grouping of people who are all feeling desperate, anxious, panicky, fearful, mistrusting, unsafe, that's what will manifest in the country as a whole. So it's almost as if the macro, the big picture is created by the group of individuals. And we're not a small group. We, as a collective, must see how do we contribute individually to that state of the collective. So if we live in fear and we mistrust and we're hatred, full of hatred, we will behave that way. And the collective will be seen as that. If we are trusting and safe with each other, how will the collective then behave? I believe vastly differently. So I feel that if we want change, that's where we need to start. Not up there with the politicians, but here with each single individual in our country.
I like what you said about information doesn't translate into transformation, but information does have a certain degree of influence on your life. I mean, we're going to talk about influences a little later on, and that just kind of, struck a chord with me. They do have a huge influence in how you make decisions and choices in your life. Would it be the very same for politicians? And we know that, there's been a lot of anxiety around these elections. People are wanting the change. People want to see something different in the country. People want hope. They want trust. They want to know that their children are going to be secure, that their children are going to be employable, and not then decide to go for greener pastures by immigrating. And I'm sure that you're seeing a lot of that in your practice as well. When young people come in, they're talking about anxiety, fear, depression, instability, a future that possibly is very bleak. What are you hearing and how are you responding to them?
Okay, my first point is we have a generation of wonderfully creative young people, phenomenally so. In fact, as an older person, I am extremely aware of them, their contribution or the possibility of their contribution. But what concerns me, and I see that in my practice, and I also see that in a social setting, when you socialize with younger people, what has shaped their viewpoint. And the little bit that I worry about that can become a very big thing is, do they really think things through? They Google everything. They assume that's it, that's the fact, no more investigation required, and therefore they are vastly influenced by influences or just by what is put out there, whether it's from a political point of view, whether it is from a how to be in the world point of view. I am very reluctant to give my time to spending it on YouTube, TikTok, social media in general, because I find that it devours hours of your time if you let it.
And sadly, Frida, the young people are doing just exactly that.
That's my point.
They are absolutely addicted to their devices and to all of those platforms that you've just mentioned now.
Exactly, and they believe that whatever they see there is true. I saw a cute little meme the other day of a parrot in a car, and it said that one should be careful not to follow social media. Look at this. The parrot is bigger than the car, and it was quite funny. So I always warn people to not just scroll relentlessly or addictively, as you say, because it is absolutely an addictive way of being. And the result of that is they chase the so-called dopamine hit, which I also feel is a vast oversimplification of how the brain works, but leave that for later. But they don't question it. It's just the next thing, the next thing, and the next thing. So they are bombarded with so-called information, but is it even truth? Is it even valid? Is it even useful? Those questions are never asked because it's just the next thing. So it is almost entering into a semi-trance state of okay next, and it's literally training the brain to become comfortable with seconds of interaction instead of conversation, time to think, questioning, discussing, exploring. And that's part of why that concerns me. And also in the political arena, it's very easy to put a lot of TikTok information out there, and it is devoured like that. But do we trust it? Is it truth? Is it honorable? Is it moral? And those are the things that we need to look at.
It's very worrying for parents, is it not? Because we're talking about our current situation, which is problematic in itself. So I'm kind of thinking, what about in 5 years and 10 years' time. And we know we are now in the instant age. So even 5 years is a very long time span that we're allowing for the change of things. I mean, look at technology. It's really moving by leaps and bounds. Any area, industry, medical science and you know the scientific world, you're getting newer and newer innovations with every passing day, and you kind of wonder what's our world going to be like in 5 years' time. And if we're worried about the current situation, what then? So think about that. Let's go for our first ad break, and you can respond to me right after.
Perfect.
I'm talking with Frida Willis. She's a psychotherapist, and if you're wondering why am I speaking with a psychotherapist about these issues, simply because these are, if we don't address these type of issues, if we don't understand what's happening currently in and around ourselves, our families, our communities, we're all going to be very broken people going forward. We won't be able to think, we won't be able to articulate, and we won't be able to have relationships. And isn't that the core of our existence? Well, all of that and much more right after the ad break. Welcome back. My guest is Frida Willis. She's a psychotherapist and a life coach. We're talking about the world we live in today. We touched a little bit on post-elections. Yes, we don't have the results as yet, but I think that's going to also have a huge impact on our young people going forward. We're also talking anxiety and depression. We're going to touch on we've already touched on the instant age that we're living in and the influences that have such a huge influence on our lives. That is the current situation. What is the immediate and the distant future going to look like? How is our world changing? Are we ready for those changes? Frida.
I think we are, if we look in the right places. If we stop for a moment, which is something very few people do, which is one of the first things I want to encourage people to do, is just put your phone down for a minute. Settle down with yourself. Close your eyes if you have to, because yes, we are bombarded by a lot of stuff. And just check in with yourself. Who is there? And what's it like inside? Anxiety, depression, it's inside. It's that world behind your eyes. That is your home. I often ask people, where do you live? And they say, Pretoria, Randburg, Cape Town. I say, no. Actually, you live in the world behind your eyes. Yes. In your mental home. What is that mental home like? If you never stop to question that, you will never know how you are doing, where you are heading, and are you satisfied? Is this working for you? Because if you are constantly scrolling and just taking in very minute tidbits of information and you absorb that as the truth, you are setting yourself up for massive confusion. None of your true, magical, unique potential can come forward because you're just following this person, that person. You know, then it's fashion on YouTube to have a big microphone and talk there, and then next minute they're holding their little microphones. And it's all those kind of things that it's minute influences, but we don't stop to ask, why are we doing this? And I believe human beings are enormously creative, and that's where I hold my faith in humanity, is for the creativity to come out for the betterment of all. Not just, oh, let me dress up with the latest huge spectacles from China, let me look the right part, let me photograph every meal, let me be seen driving a Lexus or whatever vehicle. It's not the point. The point is, who are you being when you are alone with yourself? So I feel that's the place where we need to start. And I often think that we need a psychological gift of the givers, where we can reach people to bring them to the place of, wait a minute, that's what we need. wait a minute. Start there. Just stop for a minute. We are on the go 24/7. I know school children, youngsters, 12, 13, that are on their phones right through the night. And parents allow that because that also gives the parent the time to do his or her own thing on his or her own device. So that's a concern for me.
Absolutely.
As a family, the individuals need to work at becoming healthy, because when you have a healthy family, only then we will have a healthy community and a healthy society.
So you're also talking about personal touch, personal connectedness. Put that device down for a half an hour. Family should say no cell phones at the dinner table, or have certain rules that work for you and your family, so people know. And I think this is what's the fear going forward, is we're going to lose the touch of connectivity, or how to connect with other people. We're only going to connect via our devices. That's very worrisome, I must say. And then, of course, there's also the other aspect that I want to touch on, and that is going for therapy or counseling, which is huge in this day and age because we're not connecting enough with other human beings. So you need to be talking. I mean, in the past, how did we heal? We had huge circles of friends and family. We didn't need to go to a therapist like yourself, because we spoke to all of the people around us, our friends, our family, and we were heard, we were understood, and we were given different bits of advice, and we decided what would work for us.
Exactly.
Now, we know that as far as the Western world is concerned, it's almost fashionable to have your own therapist that you see on a regular basis, or a coach. And it's good. It's good that we have that as a backup. However, a lot of men in South Africa seem to think it's not masculine to go to a life coach or to a therapist. Why do they think that way? How do we shift that thinking?
Wow, that's a big question. I think there's been a unspoken cultural big boys don't cry kind of mindset coming from way back, decades, generations. And I often say to people, if your culture is bad for your mental health, you must question your culture. So the movement towards younger people being more open about how they feel is a positive one. But we do have a generation of men that are still very badly trapped in their rigid upbringing, their strong control, strong self, almost a shutdown. And that's also where you see a lot of addiction, because addiction is a disease of lack of attachment, lack of connection, lack of feeling validated. And it can go way back. We don't even know how far back it can go. But it is true that I see that with older men who are almost emotionally frozen, stiff in that sense. It's this way or that way. There's no gray area. There's also no willingness to reconsider, willingness to discuss, willingness to grow. And I'm not saying this as a general fact, because there are people who show that they are able to change, and all human beings are able to change. It's a matter of choice. It's a matter of realizing, what am I doing to other people? How am I impacting on other people? You know, that's another trendy thing, is the whole narcissism thing. Every relationship that goes bad, oh, he was a narcissist, she was a narcissist, and that's again wrapped up in the whole ghosting thing. Walk away from people, walk away from this, don't tolerate that. That's a symptom of what you said earlier, that people don't communicate. Because if you sit down with somebody and you are in your own authentic, unique self, you are able to be seen and be heard. And I've experienced this thousands of times in my life. I often say to people something they've heard before, but because it comes from a grounded, real, sincere, authentic care, it's as if they are then ready to hear you. Whereas in a marriage or a relationship, the other person might be so worked up and anxious already, and already so invalidated and so lonely, that by the time it comes out of their mouth, it comes out in an incredibly wrong way, and it becomes an attack, and people become defensive, and then the other person becomes avoidant. So it's a chain of events that can happen because, firstly, we don't sit with ourselves to clarify things for ourselves. We don't know ourselves well enough. We don't regulate ourselves well enough to say, okay, this is where I'm at, this is what's working for me, this is what's not, this is how I'm going to approach it. And people have become skittish in terms of conversation. Almost all conversation nowadays, politically and otherwise, is seen as a preaching or an attack, where it is not. It is a call for connection. And that's the thing that you and I know we as a grouping of people, humanity, need. We cannot live in isolation. We cannot live being marginalized. We cannot live being cut off. So that's the key, is that communication.
I think young people today would, and even older people for that matter, would justify connection or connectivity via their devices. They're going to say, but I am in contact. I do speak to X number of people all day long. So how can you say that I'm not connecting? So what's the difference, Frida? What would you say to them that sitting on your device all day long, yes, you are connecting with people, but what's the difference between connecting via your device and sitting down person to person? What's the difference? And we'll have you respond right after the ad break.
Great.
Frida Willis, a life coach and a psychotherapist, is here talking to us about feelings, connectivity, I guess social influences and how they, or rather we allow them to influence our lives, and how you try to break away from the shackles of those influences, how you make the right decisions that's right for you and your loved ones. All of that and more coming up with Frida Willis right here on Perspective. Welcome back. I do hope you're enjoying the show thus far. Amazing psychotherapist and life coach in studio with me. We're looking at issues around influences. We're looking at issues around interacting via our devices, where people are not making enough time to connect on a personal, person-to-person basis. And that is very important. Frida?
Absolutely. We are wonderfully made as human beings. No scientist has ever been able to tell us how and why our brains function, how it works. We talk about dopamine and serotonin and all sorts of things, but it's diluted because we don't really know all of it. We are made with our senses. Our senses fulfill a vital, important role in our survival as an individual, as a society, as a humanity. So if we now throw that by the wayside and we say, but I talk to Julie on WhatsApp 7 times a day, you're not talking with. You're not connecting. You are speaking your speak, she's speaking her speak, but all of our senses that are meant to be engaged in conversation, tone of voice, expressions around the eyes, facial movements, physical movements, hand gestures, posture. Where's that? So now we replace it with emojis, and do we really communicate effectively then? I'm not so sure. It's almost as if we've gone back to hieroglyphics instead of saying, but I need to be present with you. And I think when we spoke earlier on about anxiety and depression, the filter, the barrier between you and me, that is your phone and my phone, and all the emojis and gestures that it offers, becomes a place for us to hide. I don't have to be authentic. I can quickly respond. That's why you also have so many scam relationships, desperately lonely people young people wanting to be loved, wanting to feel they belong, they get scammed by a person saying, I love you online. Person they haven't met for 2-3 years, ever, will never meet, because that person is not real. It is almost like a factory somewhere where a group of people run a scam industry, and young people get taken by that. Not too long ago, I had a client who connected with, and she's in her 30s. It's not like she's a 17-year-old or even younger, but that does happen too. Got involved with a gentleman she met on a dating website, and the infatuation and the love was there within a week or two, but they've never met. So what I learned from this, and what I want people to see, is you are manufacturing the story in your mind. So the place where we need to start working is, what am I doing here in my mind, in my landscape behind my eyes, in my inner world? Am I too gullible? Am I questioning? Am I aware of how I operate? So it goes back for me to that. We need our senses. We need to look each other in the eye, to feel safe with each other, to know that we are both real, to see your authenticity, to see your warmth. None of that can be conveyed through a device. And so much can be told to the other person that is not even a genuine feeling from that person.
Frida, I'm just wondering then, how does this then impact on our person-to-person interactions? Because if we're so dependent on our devices, do we then feel intimidated when we meet in person other people? Because the device is almost like some sort of protective armor for us.
Yeah.
We can be something or someone we're not. We can say things we wouldn't say to the other person, possibly in person. So how is it taking away from us regarding our senses, our feelings, our hearing, our understanding of reading body language?
I think that's the dangerous part. That is where we lose touch, where we get out of practice. And you know, any new skill that we learn requires repetition. So if I want to be good at golf, or good at any sport or any skill, even studying, it's a skill, or emotional intelligence, that's a skill. I must practice it. I must make my mistakes, reflect back inward, make the necessary changes, and then go forward by repetition. So if all I do every day is look into a square screen where I am not practicing my true humanity, my warmth, I will become unable to use it when required. So yes, it's taking away our confidence. It's heightening our anxiety, because if I haven't heard from person A, B, or C in 3 minutes, the stress level rises, the anxiety, the doubt, the fear. None of this is conducive to a warm, supported, safe world. And if we don't feel safe, we become desperate. And that's at the core of so much of these behaviors that go viciously wrong. Things like school shootings. There's so much hatred, fear, separation in the world. Why? Because we don't get to sit next to somebody and just feel what it feels like. Am I safe with this person? Can I exhale and just be with somebody who I can be with? No need to talk. Just sit and say, this is a fellow human.
And feel accepted.
And feel accepted.
Not necessarily validated, because there is a difference between those
Yes.
two words, acceptance and validation. Can you expand a little on that, please?
Yes. To be really seen for who you are, faults and all. You know, I have a little theory of my own. We're all 70% good, and 30% we've got work to do. And that will flex and change as we grow, because the 30 will be there.
You know, we can't be all good or all bad. There's no such a thing.
That's an absolute fact. What you're saying there is, we are human, and that brings with that pure, genuine, erroneous, mistake-making person. We're all of us. Over 8 billion people on the planet, we all fall into that category. But what is so important, your question is, what is the difference between acceptance and validation? I think it's almost like Maslow's hierarchy. We want to be seen. We just want to say, I see you. I know there was a movie a year or two ago where that was part of their greeting. I see you. And to me, it gives me goosebumps, because that's what each human at his or her or their very core require. Just see me. And we cannot see each other for who we are on a device. It's not
so
possible.
let's move slightly back to this I see you. It's also about, I guess, marginalization. Because if I don't fit into your category of an acceptable person, I'm going to be rejected or marginalized. What's it doing to that person? How does it break him or her down? I'm talking self-esteem, etc. What must she or he do to be, and this happens a lot at school, and I think that's why you have a lot of bullying as well.
Very much.
And it happens in our family units. And our communities as well. So you have your preferences, your favorites, and you have your little clans. So out of a group of 30 people, maybe 5 people or 10 people will create a clique, and the rest are left to their own resources. Or 20 will create a clique because they're like-minded, and the others will just be left on the periphery to either, you know, make the best they can do of their lives, or they just get lost. They are lost to the system. Would that be a fair reflection of, I guess, how society operates?
I want to almost go back to the 70-30. There's a mainstream in the world, and it could happen in any country, it could happen in any culture, it could happen in any town, and most definitely in any family. There are people that I call people on the hill. So you have your mainstream people who don't question much, who just carries on, and they're happy with their life. And then there are people who do question, and people who do feel, I'm different, I don't fit in. But those people must find each other and resonate with each other. It's almost like a different type of being in the world. So yes, it can happen that you invalidated, that you marginalized for being weird. I remember my family kept on telling me, I'm so bohemian. And as a small child, I didn't even know what the word meant. Now I'm grateful for it, because it suits my differentness and my way of thinking about the world. And I'm grateful for that. So I don't necessarily follow that stream, but I have practiced the art of living in both worlds. And that's, I think, something that we can teach our young people who do feel isolated, to find your tribe, but also live in both worlds.
There's a danger in that too, isn't it? Because finding your tribe might be the wrong tribe, and you'll end up hurting yourself badly if you're with the wrong group or the wrong tribe. But more of that, and very especially influences right after the ad break. Frida Willis is here. She's a psychotherapist and life coach. And I'm also going to ask her, where and how does a life coach come into play with this, the lost 30% of the people, or the 30% that don't necessarily fit in with the 70%? Does a life coach then help them find themselves and then find their tribe, but the right tribe? Stay with us. Welcome back, and I say it every time I have a guest in studio, and that is, the hour is just not long enough to cover everything that we need to cover on the show, but let's see how far we get. And of course, Frida, I think sometimes the off-air discussions are so much more interesting.
Yeah, I think it goes deeper.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. Let's respond to those
Right.
issues that I just raised pre the ad break.
Absolutely. I think, again, I need to state information is not transformation. You might feel like you belong to a grouping because you follow them online. That does not mean they are your home base, your home people. People often find that if they are comfortable with a more distant group, not at home, not safe in your physical environment, they are so afraid of losing that connection that they almost avoid that, because once that is lost, that is their everything, that is lost. And also, you know, you mentioned the lost 30%. I don't really think they're lost. I think they're more selective. And perhaps they're the grouping that's perhaps questioning more or feeling deeper and are therefore more sensitive and also afraid of then being hurt, or they have been hurt already and they find it really hard to find the inner skill set to venture out and trust again. Because remember, we are all constantly learning and constantly training each other. And that brings me to the question of, can a life coach do anything about that? That depends on the individual. If a person comes and say, you know, I've been told to come and see somebody, but I don't really see the valid use of it, then you're not going to get far. I do, however, believe that we should plant little seeds and it will germinate when that person is ready. So that I absolutely believe in. But if a person comes to me and say, you know what, I don't belong. I currently have a person that I'm working with that is working for a school, and she is one of the marginalized. She does not fit into their grouping. It is very, very hard for her. And the process that we are working on is her decisions, how she responds to that perceived rejection. And you know, your show is called Perspective, and I think that is one of the most potent words that we can possibly have. If we change our perspective on something, if we learn how to reframe a situation and look at it from a different angle, there is often enormous relief and enormous empowerment that comes along with that. What I worry about is if a person is constantly blaming, you're the problem, they're the problem, we are so disempowered. If you become more self-aware of what is happening in my inner world, why am I filtering their behavior and believing them that I'm not good enough, or believing that they are against me, that's where you make the changes. That's where you rebrand the inner landscape to, let me see if I can see this through a different filter, and work on a word that you mentioned, your self-esteem and your not so instant, not so quick to respond. Because we tend to, you know, you treat me bad, I treat you worse. You treat me worse, I take it even further. That is not effective. But people often don't have the skill set, the emotional intelligence to say, I will observe you, but I won't absorb you. And that's important. So you equip that person with a skill set that they learn through repetition, and that's their choice. I cannot make you do this. I put it there, I give you the tools, teach you how to use them. It's your job to go and implement. And that's really important.
So, Frida, we talking about connectivity, disconnectivity, cliques of people, marginalization, acceptance, validation, etc. Here is where our social influences come into play. They seem to play a huge role in the lives of young people these days. And if you're seen not to be following a certain person, a certain influencer, you're almost looked upon as, you know, she's not with it.
Yeah, what's wrong with you?
Absolutely. Let's look at the influencer, what's going on inside her head, the sense of importance, because she's got 20, 30, 100, 2 million,
yeah.
2 million followers. What's it doing to her? And also let's look at the people that follow her. let's look at the pros and cons from both sides, and very especially with the influencers. They are the type of people that put their whole lives out for the whole world to see. And in a lot of cases, and I know I'm making generalization here, is with their immediate circle. And we know that in immediate circles as well, you're not connected to all of them. You have your favorites. So you'll share with your favorites, and those that you believe is outside of your circle, they won't share. Everything's a big secret. Yet if you go to their blogs or to their Instagram or whatever it is, their whole lives are put out there. I find that such a disconnect.
Absolutely, you are right. And we must understand that the ego plays a massive role. You know, we are all exposed to movies and what is generally known as the Hollywood world, and it's all about how well you can present yourself and how good you look and how much people like you and how adored you are for this role and that role. And we have been sold the idea of that's reality. We must all aspire to be wealthy, drive the vehicle, be seen at the right parties. And it's very much the same. It's almost amplified now with influencers. And I jokingly call myself the anti-influencer because there are stuff that's going on out there that I just have to bombard with questions and say, what the heck are you thinking? And where is this leading your life? So let's assume I'm very well built and I have lashes that are this long and I'm in front of my YouTube or whichever channel, because there's a lot out there, and I'm constantly talking to you as if you are here with me. That person becomes addicted too. So those influencers are often behind the scenes highly insecure, often addicted to substances because their power has overwhelmed their capability of functioning as a normal, happy, healthy human being. We are dealing with a very big phenomenon that has almost become cult-like. So you have the young, dynamic, beautiful, and they're all beautiful, they're all perfectly built influencers, and they have perfect teeth and perfect hair, and the young people follow them without questioning.
And whatever they do is absolutely perfect.
It's the thing to do. It's the way to be. Whether you are cooking, whether you are just fixing something and showing off your body, that has become the way to be. What concerns me is that we sit with a generation of people who give themselves up to emulate that other person. And then we lose this person's unique contribution to the world. And then they sit with passivity and frustration because you can't be another that person. You've got to be a unique you. That's why you're brought into this world. And so we sit with a possible risk of losing a lot of wonderful contribution because somebody else is following somebody else's way.
We've got 3 minutes to wrap up. 2 very important questions, Frida, that I do need to ask you is, with the way technology is rapidly moving ahead, what's going to happen in 5 years' time to these supposed influencers? They're going to burn out, and we are living in the instant age. Eventually, people are going to be very bored of them and whatever brand they're promoting, whether it's their bodies, their cooking, makeup tips, whatever it is, it's going to also, they're going to reach their sell-by date. So what happens to them, and people are going to be looking out for the next big thing for their instant fix.
Absolutely true. I can almost not put it better than you've just done. What we need to understand is we will perhaps sit with a very creative world, so more things will develop, more things will come along. And I have lived 56 years on this planet. I can assure you there's always something new coming up. So there will be a continuation and perhaps an intensification of this. And I cannot say that that will necessarily be good or bad, because we as individuals hold the choice. But if there's anything I can say to anybody who's watching and anybody who might be listening is, do not give up who you are. Do not fall for the superficial. Calm down, sit down, meet yourself, bring about your contribution to the world. We can't all be peaches or plums. You've got to be what you are. You've got to be who you are. And you've got to bring that to the world. Otherwise, there's an empty space where you should have been and could have been contributing to the world. And it almost brings me back to that whole, we need a authentic, not just Googled it and presented it, psychological value add to the world. We can no longer just say, oh, I've Googled it and this is how you live your life. People are going to fall out with that falseness, with that superficiality. They really need to come back to core and truth and honor and morality. And that's what I pray for.
And that's where we leave it. Thank you indeed for your insights on this matter, and I hope we can have you in again sometime soon. Thank you once again.
Thanks.
I sincerely hope you've enjoyed the wise words of Frida Willis. She is a psychotherapist and a life coach as well. We touched on post-elections, we touched on the instant age, instant gratification, social influences, and how to move forward in this world and not get caught up in that trap of what you presume is glitzy and glamorous. Get real. Get in touch with yourself is what Frida Willis says. So till the next time, from me here at Perspective and our production team, thank you for watching. And as always, stay safe. Assalamu alaikum and Khuda Hafiz.